Wildfires, you are not alone. No matter how sad, scared, or heartbroken you feel, CalHope is here for you and all those affected by the devastating wildfires. Find free, safe, and confidential mental health support at calhope.org.
KBLA Talk 1580 stands with you neighbor to neighbor, bringing you resources and what you need to know. For information on fire recovery resources, recovery hubs, and available services.
This is the KBLA Sports Minute with Ray Richardson.
The Lakers started the second half of the season Wednesday night with a tough loss at home to the Charlotte Hornets, 100-97. LeBron missed 2 3-pointers in the final 6 seconds that could have sent the game into overtime. LeBron still had a productive night with 26 points and 11 assists. Lakers coach J.J. Redick may want to have a chat with his team about their three-point shooting. The Lakers made only 15 of 51 three-point attempts. Luka Doncic was 1 for 9. The Lakers are at Portland tonight. The Clippers begin their second half schedule tonight in Milwaukee. The USC women's basketball team, number 4 in the country, held off Michigan State 83-75 at the Galen Center. 28 points for USC star Juju Watkins. The Trojans, in first place in the Big Ten Conference by a game and a half over third-ranked UCLA, clinched a bye in the Big Ten tournament. No debates, no speculation, just the info you need. That's your KBLA Sports Minute. I'm Ray Richardson. More news, opinions, and conversation when we come forward on KBLA Talk 1580.
It's KBLA Talk 1580's third annual Black History Month luncheon, and you're invited. This is year 2 of our climate justice work, and this year's $2 million 12-month campaign is all about linking and combating the relationship between climate and Black health. We already know that these wildfires will leave in their wake even greater inequities, including negative impacts on Black health, given the toxic air pollutants circulating in the air we breathe. So, as part of this year's climate campaign, we're honoring Black doctors and leaders in healthcare at our annual Black History Month luncheon, Friday, February 28th at noon. If you would like to join us, just go to our KBLA 1580 website and register for your chance to be our guest at the luncheon. We'd love to see you. And in case you haven't heard the news, KBLA Talk 1580 was just named one of the semifinalists for the American Climate Leadership Awards 2025. Caring about the climate, caring about the community, changing the conversation. We're KBLA Talk 1580, and we don't black down.
Yes, indeed. It is Black History Month around here, and we have an information-dense show for you today. Something to feed your head with beyond the constant 24-hour news cycle, and I'm glad about that, by the way. I'm joined in studio right now by someone who's been recognized as an innovative thinker on how people and institutions hide harmful truths. Her current work is examining the role of social control, the underside of government, such as prisons, courts, and treasuries. She is a path-breaking scholar, and her latest book, out right now, Carceral Apartheid, How Lies and White Supremacists Run Our Prisons is definitely worth reading. Dr. Brittany Friedman, welcome.
Thank you so much, Dominique. I appreciate that and that intro. Wow, thank you.
Yeah, thanks for coming in. It's a huge topic, right? And it kind of, it stands on it's kind of a continuation in a way of other works, a continuation, a next level of other works, not surprisingly, by Black authors. What drew you to this deep dive? It is a deep dive. You clearly have done some pretty serious research around what happens inside the prison system, particularly around the treatment of Black activists.
So I have always been deeply inspired by the work of Black women writers and Black women doing investigative work. Like Ida B. Wells is my hero, has always
been.
Mine
too, by the way.
Yes. Yes. I mean, she really stood in the face of, tremendous white supremacist violence and inspired me when I first started learning more and more about the prison movement in California. I've always been interested in social movements because I come from a long line of people that have been very active in their communities. And like many Black people, as we celebrate this month, we celebrate our ancestors and the contributions that they've made to movements. And when I was learning about Black movements in prison in California, I just was unsatisfied with the state propaganda that was coming through in all that I was reading. I was like, this is very clearly a lie. This is trying to promote this criminalization of our communities, and that is how you are able to discount protest and what it means. And so I wanted to investigate that and expose it in so many different ways that it makes it hard to really deny, everything that I've laid out.
Yeah, and one of the many things that I found interesting in this book is that you talk about how not just erasure, but the actual obscuring or hiding of documents and evidence, really, of what happens inside our carceral system will make it harder and is making it harder for people to find out what really even happened and what's happening now.
Absolutely. I mean, that's what I was just so blown away when I started digging into private archives, not just the state archives in Sacramento, which definitely there was a lot creeping and hiding there. But, my favorite archive was in Sacramento. It was a private archive that was held in the attic of an original member of the Black Panther Party. And he was amazing. Like when I went into his home, he welcomed me and he's like, let me take you to my collection. And he had been keeping original documents for decades and doing that work of building a community archive, what Kelly Lytle Hernandez calls a rebel archive that you have to keep because the state will obscure, right? It will obscure documents, will obscure knowledge to put forth narratives and disinformation about Black protest, about pushing against state violence. And that leads to further incarceration, right? The same narratives that are played out in court. And so his archive just taught me so much about courage, about what it means to be a true intellectual in your community. And I always remember him when I am talking or even just going through my own work. I'm like, I hope one day to be able to build something like that where generations can look back and say, wow, that is something so powerful that we can use now.
So you're talking about an activist, a member of the Black Panther Party, who just kept papers, just files and papers, and who was transferred here and what happened to whom. And the reason I say that is because you don't really think about that. But when you say stuff was obscured by the state, I mean, are you talking about the archives are hidden, or things are destroyed, or they're redacted? Like, what is that? How does that happen?
So there's a few different levels of what I would consider to be official suppression. First, making it very difficult to access records that are considered restricted. And so it's very hard for the public to gain access to those records in the state archives in Sacramento. And you have to go through all of these official institutional review boards. But typically that's going to be people that are at universities that have these review boards that can write letters on your behalf. And so that's what happened to me. I started out, way back in 2013, I was a student. I was a grad student in Chicago, and I came out here, stayed with my family that's in California, and made my way to the archive with my review board. And I'm like, see, you have to let me see these because I have this piece of paper. But that's one of the means of obscuring, is, just causing these organizational blocks.
So it's just like randomly, this is restricted. You can't see this. It doesn't fit our narrative.
Yeah, exactly. And what I found when I was in the restricted section, that's what really it made all of the interviews I had done so far come to life. Everything I'd looked at in the private archive, I'm like, this is why this is restricted, because I'm looking at memos from prison officials to attorneys saying, how do we suppress, for example, lawsuits that were coming in from incarcerated members of various groups like the Nation of Islam, for example. Like, how do we suppress their lawsuits, and coordinating different strategies? In the restricted section, I also found investigations, and they were like basically COINTELPRO-esque. And during the same time period, too, investigations into Black people that had been identified as being belonging to Black power movements or the larger Black freedom movement, and then labeling them in files and laying out policies and procedures for what do we do with them next, which I lay out in my book. They segregated people in isolation cells that were torture in adjustment centers. And even I found letters in the restricted section from, other prison systems out of state writing to California. And it really shows how California had a big influence on what we see as the spread of, policies in prisons to really declare war on Black communities.
Talking with Dr. Brittany Friedman, and we'll get into explaining what adjustment centers are, and specifically how segregation, so fascinating, is almost like enforced as a means, you lay out in your book, to specifically target Black radical imprisoned persons. We'll look at that and more when we continue this conversation, only on KBLA Talk 1580.
The station you turn to when you've had it up to gear with cultural incompetence. KBLA Talk 1580.
Can your pad absorb everything and stay fresh? Always Radiant with Flex Foam can. Get up to 0 leaks, 0 odor, and 0 feel. Because Flex Foam is the only pad with a flexible foam core. You heard me, foam. Always Radiant is so thin, it feels like nothing, yet protects like nothing else. Can your pad do that? For up to 100% leak-free protection, try Always Radiant to see what Flex Foam can do for you.
Fatherhood includes being present during pregnancy, delivery, and beyond, supporting your partner, and advocating for your baby's health. Black fathers play a key role in reducing maternal and infant health inequalities. Join the free AIM Fatherhood Program and make a difference. Visit blackinfantsandfamilies.org/fatherhood.
I can't believe how spotless my floors look after using the Swiffer Power Mop. No more dragging around a heavy mop and messy bucket. Now I get the same deep clean without all the work. Thanks to the powerful solution and scrubbing pad of the Swiffer Power Mop, dirt and grime don't stand a chance, and I don't break a sweat. Mic drop. Mop drop.
Swiffer Power Mop. Swiffer Power Mop.
A smarter way to mop. Try it or your money back.
They can do anything they want to us. We might not be back. I might be in jail. I might be anywhere. But when I leave, you can remember I said with the last words on my lips, and I am a revolutionary.
On Saturday, February 22nd, you are invited to A Night with the Panthers, a special fundraiser dedicated to supporting Black Panther veterans who now require assistance with essential needs such as medicine, food, and housing. These Black Panther veterans championed human rights, fed the hungry, educated the community, and stood as powerful symbols of resistance and resilience. Despite their incredible sacrifices, loving and serving the people did not come with retirement plans or financial security. So, Now it's our time to honor their legacy and ensure that they are cared for with the dignity they deserve. You can help by attending and supporting A Night with the Panthers, Saturday, February 22nd, 6:30 p.m. to 10 p.m. at the Project 43 Team Post Center, 6841 Crenshaw Boulevard, Los Angeles. For more information, contact Black Panther Party Breakfast at gmail.com or call 707-554-2784. That's Black Panther Party Breakfast at gmail.com or call 707-554-2784. This is a community call to action from KBLA Talk 1580. At KBLA Talk 1580, we've got your black.
What you want to do, huh?
KBLA Talk 1580 is thrilled to share that we have been named as a semifinalist for the coveted American Climate Leadership Awards, honoring our climate work last year. We're also delighted to announce year 2 of our Climate Justice Crusade. This year's $2 million 12-month campaign will link and combat the relationship between climate change and poor health outcomes for African Americans and the poor. Climate inequities have taken a toll with multiple health triggers in the Black community, such as extreme heat and poor air quality, made worse by the recent wildfires. Our work to ensure climate justice and climate equity continues. In the coming weeks and months, you'll be hearing a lot more about our 2025 climate campaign. To learn more about our plans for this year and the companies and organizations supporting us, log on to our website at kbla1580.com. Caring about the climate, caring about the community, changing the conversation. At KBLA Talk 1580, we've got your black. Thanks for waking up with Dominique DiPrima on KBLA Talk 1580.
We're talking with Dr. Brittany Friedman. Carceral Apartheid is her book, How Lies and White Supremacists Run Our Prisons. And this is our third try. We finally got it done. Your family impacted by the Eaton Canyon fires. I'm glad you're okay. I'm glad you're here. And, sad to hear
Thank you.
The ongoing impact.
I think it's mostly, we've been okay and we're safe. I think the stress has been that our former community where we used to live in Pasadena, my children's former school burned down because it was right at the top of Altadena, up at the top of Lake Street, and just trying to help through mutual aid and helping our former school and former community has been a lot, but it's also a story of resilience. My daughter's teacher, when I heard her school burn down, we all her home, we all cried because we were just like, wow, like it's a lot. Yeah. But it is a blessing to kind of see how people have come together, and we, even though we don't live there anymore, we very much feel so connected and are doing as much as we can to help them rebuild.
Yeah, well, I'm sorry about your kids' school and your community. And here you go, continuing your work, talking about your book, Carceral Apartheid. So much stuff in there to explore. I mean, you specifically mentioned the Nation of Islam, and I was surprised to see the amount of material you were able to find on programs targeting them and their work and the spread of their work inside the prison system.
I was also quite surprised myself when I took my first trip to the state archives and I started looking through the restricted collection that was titled The Investigations. That's when I discovered, wow, the Nation of Islam was the first organized group that I could find in the archive that was targeted by the Department of Corrections specifically and named and had procedures designed around identifying members, segregating members in solitary units, and then torturing members through a variety of means in addition to solitary. And that was really the first campaign, if you will, to wage war on incarcerated Black people in an organized way that I was able to find. And
the other thing that I hadn't thought about, maybe you can explain this. It sounded like as the numbers of black people were growing in prison, as black people become a bigger and bigger part of the prison population, this becomes a concern because of the balance of power behind bars?
Yes, 100%. It's just mirroring what we saw happening on the West Coast in the 50s, in the 60s and 70s, right? As greater numbers of black people are migrating, especially from the Deep South and running from, someone told me in an interview who eventually joined the Black guerrilla family during his incarceration. He said, I grew up in Alabama and we saw the Klan. And as a little kid, we came to California. And then when I was incarcerated, I met the Klan again in the form of the Aryan Brotherhood. And so I think there is this connection to an increasing black population looking to, start over in a place that they're hoping is not going to have as much white supremacist violence, but then encountering it again in places like here in LA, in Oakland. And then we see, the birth of movements to liberate people from what they end up encountering on the West Coast.
And so then this idea of segregation within the prisons, do you see it as stemming from that?
Yes, segregation is it's a tool to create political warfare. It's very effective because when you segregate people that are politically conscious, that are seeking to educate the population about the conditions, right? To also to unite people across racial groups. That's what was so powerful about all of the black leaders that were incarcerated, right? That are political prisoners. They are uniting people across racial groups around this idea that we're a prisoner class and we're fighting a system that is profiting off of us and our labor and our existence. And segregation is an amazing tool that the Department of Corrections, just institutionalizes because it can prevent that.
So then you document collaboration between guards and white supremacist groups.
Yes, and that collaboration being so explicit, it didn't surprise me. It was more of, when you're doing very deep investigative qualitative work, when you have people confirming a pattern such as alliances between corrupt correctional officers and self-identified imprisoned Nazis that eventually formed the Aryan Brotherhood in the 60s in San Quentin, it is it just kind of, it blows your mind. You're like, wow, I just read this in an archive where I'm reading someone's letter that they wrote, for example, in 1965, where they're writing to their attorney and they're saying, this is what they're doing to me. And their officers are corrupt. They're not like Nazis are organizing with them. And then to be, in a room with someone, having dinner with their family with my recorder, doing an interview, and then they're describing experiencing the same thing. It connects all the dots. And, I even had former white supremacists, they confirmed the same thing in their interviews about these alliances and how things work and their place in the hierarchy.
I mean, it sounds like it's illegal.
Mm-hmm. It is. Absolutely. It's what I would consider extra legal control, which is necessary to maintain racial domination. You can't just have laws and policies. You have to have a layer of extra legal violence that manifests in the form of the Klan on the outside. And within prison, it manifests as having enforcers that are incarcerated that work for you and will take out people that you deem to be threatening. And that threatening label, it's falling on to black political prisoners that are organizing.
Ooh, so many questions come out of that. Why do you say you have to have a layer of extrajudicial violence?
Because I have seen that in the way that our society is organized, which is one that is based on greed and extraction and control, official policies are not enough to achieve these goals. And that's why we have, what we would say is corruption, I would also say is extra legal. It is a way of going around the law to achieve your end. And if your end is community decimation, greed driven, then you do need that layer, because our laws on face value, they don't allow for the level of violence that it takes to actually maintain the type of control that people in elite positions want to maintain. And so that's what we see historically. It's like, the laws they're not enough.
Even this segregation, which is pretty widely acknowledged to exist right within the prison system, at least here in California, at least, but my understanding is it's pretty widespread. It's not an official policy, right? I mean, it would be illegal, wouldn't it, to segregate prisoners based on race?
So it is. It's supposed to be illegal now, but that's what's interesting is that, I found that in practice, it is still enforced.
So how is that justified, or how is it written up? How is it presented? All the black people have to be over there, the Nazis on this side, Mexicans over here. Like, how is it enforced if it's illegal and it's not an official policy?
So what happens to people is what people told me in interviews is that when they're in, reception centers and they're entering the correctional system, they are given a choice. And California gives you a choice as to, are you black? Are you white? Are you, are you Asian? What is interesting, though, is I did do an interview with someone that I didn't get to really profile him as much in the book and feature him, but he identified as indigenous. He was like, my family is indigenous to this region. This is our land. And I was forced to identify as white because I didn't fit into the Department of Corrections boxes. And so he was like, it was pretty traumatizing for him to have to, in the speak of in prison culture, he's like, I had to run with the whites, like I had to run with the Nazis, and I'm like, yeah, that makes sense in the sense of the way that the system is designed is to keep people in these very segregated, like tightly knit boxes, because it's easier to control people if they're legible in that way.
Right, legible and fighting each other. The book is Carceral Apartheid, How Lies and White Supremacists Run Our Prisons. My guest, Dr. Brittany Friedman. We continue after news, traffic, and sports. I'm Dominique DiPrima for KBLA Talk 1580.
She's reclaiming her time on KBLA Talk 1580. More First Things First with Dominique DiPrima when we come forward.
I'm Bree Wood with 4 Things You Should Know with BIN News. 86-year-old Missouri man Andrew Lester, who pleaded guilty to shooting black teenager Ralph Yarl in 2023, has died while awaiting sentencing. Yarl, 16 at the time, was left with a traumatic brain injury. Lester had pled guilty to second-degree assault. A measles outbreak in West Texas has reached at least 58 cases. Health leaders are frustrated by the lack of federal response and fear the situation will worsen, with cases already appearing in nearby New Mexico. Researchers at the University of Virginia have discovered that a protein called CROX20 in stem cells may help reverse baldness by reactivating hair growth in follicles, even in those already bald or balding. And Delta Airlines is offering passengers on Monday's Toronto-bound flight that crash-landed $30,000 each. A Delta spokesperson says that the offer comes with no strings attached and does not affect rights. Get BIN News on demand 24/7 on the iHeartRadio app.
If you or someone you know is affected by the Los Angeles wildfires, you are not alone. No matter how sad, scared, or heartbroken you feel, CalHope is here for you and all those affected by the devastating wildfires. Find free, safe, and confidential mental health support at calhope.org.
This is the KBLA Sports Minute with Ray Richardson.
The Lakers started the second half of the season Wednesday night with a tough loss at home to the Charlotte Hornets, 100-97. LeBron missed 2 3-pointers in the final 6 seconds that could have sent the game into overtime. LeBron still had a productive night with 26 points and 11 assists. Lakers coach J.J. Redick may want to have a chat with his team about their three-point shooting. The Lakers made only 15 of 51 three-point attempts. Luka Doncic was 1 for 9. The Lakers are at at Portland tonight. The Clippers begin their second half schedule tonight in Milwaukee. The USC women's basketball team, number 4 in the country, held off Michigan State 83-75 at the Galen Center. 28 points for USC star Juju Watkins. The Trojans, in first place in the Big Ten Conference by a game and a half over third-ranked UCLA, clinched a bye in the Big Ten tournament. No debates, no speculation, just the info you need. That's your KBLA Sports Minute. I'm Ray Richardson. More news, opinions, and conversation when we come forward on KBLA Talk 1580.
Oh no, stomach issues again?
Stomach issues?
Who are you?
Your pancreas. I could be the real reason for your diarrhea, gas, bloating, stomach pain, or loose oily stools.
I thought it was my stomach.
People often do, but any of these symptoms could mean having a condition called exocrine pancreatic insufficiency, or EPI. With EPI, the pancreas doesn't release enough enzymes to break down food, but EPI is manageable. Use the symptom checker on identifyepi.com and speak with your doctor. That's identifyepi.com. Sponsored by AbbVie.
Why choose a Sleep Number smart bed?
Can I make my side softer?
Can I make my side firmer? Can we sleep cooler?
Sleep Number does that. Cools up to 8 times faster and lets you choose your ideal comfort on either side. Your Sleep Number setting. And now save 50% on the new Sleep Number limited edition smart bed. Limited time. Exclusively at a Sleep Number store near you. Learn more at sleepnumber.com.
Hey, Dad, how do airplanes fly? What's in this box? Is this tree good for climbing? How are babies made? What does this thing do?
Kids are curious about everything, including guns. Talking to them about gun safety in your home is a good first step, but you can do more. Always keep your guns locked, unloaded, and stored separately from ammunition. Safe gun storage saves lives. Learn how to make your home safer at endfamilyfire.org. That's endfamilyfire.org. Brought to you by End Family Fire, Brady, and the Ad Council.
The new year brings new health goals and wealth goals. Protecting your identity is an important step. Your info is in endless places that could expose you to identity theft, leading to lost funds. LifeLock monitors millions of data points per second. If your identity is stolen, our restoration specialists will fix it, guaranteed, or your money back. Resolve to make identity health and wealth part of your New Year's goals with LifeLock. Save up to 40% your first year with promo code NEWS. Visit lifelock.com. Terms apply.
If you're living with dry age-related macular degeneration or dry AMD, you may be at risk for developing geographic atrophy or GA. GA can be unpredictable and progress rapidly, leading to irreversible vision loss. Now there's something you can do to
slow it down and get it going slower.
Izervay is proven to slow GA progression.
Izervay gets GA going slower.
Izervay or avacincaptad pagel is a prescription eye injection used to treat GA. Don't take it if you have an infection or active swelling in or around your eye. Izervay can cause eye infection, retinal detachment, or increased risk of wet AMD. Izervay may temporarily increase eye pressure. Your vision may be impaired after an eye injection or exam. Don't delay. Ask your doctor about Izervay today.
Izervay gets GA going slower.
Visit Izervay.com. That's IZERVAY.com.
Broadcasting live from Leimert Park, USA. Welcome back to your home for unapologetically progressive radio. KBLA Talk 1580.
Dr. Brittany Friedman is in the studio with me. Her book, Carceral Apartheid, How Lies and White Supremacists Run Our Prisons, is quite an eye-opener. It's out now. You can read it. In fact, you've got a book signing coming up on March 10th.
I do. I have a book signing coming up in Pasadena at Vroman's. I'll be in conversation with Jody Armour, who is a mentor that I really respect, a civil rights attorney and professor at USC, and my really good friend Zane One, who is a local MC coming out of Whittier. I love Zane, and I'm so happy that she agreed to moderate us.
Wow, it sounds like a great event. So that's March 10th. Do you know what time you're starting?
Yes, we're starting at 7 p.m.
Okay, sounds good. Come out and support this scholar, and maybe you can be like me and get her to sign the book. We were talking about how a lot of these documents were hard to get. You had to get special permission to go into archives, stuff in the state, private collections, and I'm thinking about the moment in history we're at right now where the proposed Secretary of Education doesn't know whether it's illegal to teach Black studies. I mean, she said under oath, she's not sure. Let me get back to you on that. And it seems to me that the hiding and destroying of Black history and documents that oppose the official narrative will become more and more widespread. I mean, that's been signaled to us by the president at the moment. So what can we do about it? What responsibility does that put on, scholars and prisoners and their families and consumers of information?
I think now is the time for our communities to really step into their power and the power of having a community archive. My book wouldn't be possible without the community archives that I was invited into and that, I really was in community with. And so I would say now it is the time to save what you can, to begin to archive it. One of the best things you can always do is to digitize your materials so that if the paper quality over time becomes less, it's still accessible, and then save it in different secure forms. And so, a lot of people use Google Drive, but you can get, a good old fashioned, like when I was in undergrad a long time ago, like I don't even remember the year, like I had a little hard drive that I plugged in. And so just, saving materials and keeping track and keeping a record, because you never know who's going to need them. And that's what, the person who I am so fond of in Sacramento, he's like, I didn't know who was going to need this, but I knew someone's going to come knocking for this. And he's like, people came knocking immediately in real time. And another archive I want to shout out to that's private, that is run by a long-term activist, is the Freedom Archives in the Bay. They welcomed me. They have amazing collections, and they're such a great model for digitizing what you save. They have so many amazing digital collections on the Puerto Rican freedom movement, on the Black Power movement, on how our movements are global, right? And how we're not alone. And so that's what I would encourage us to be thinking about. How can we do that in this hostile climate that every day, materials getting erased from government websites, from, books are being banned more and more. I have so many colleagues with books that are banned. It's
okay, I'm not going to speak that.
I know, but mine could too.
Yeah, okay. You said it, I didn't. But I think it is a good advice, because if we have it and we pass it on, at least we have it. I started thinking about that when I read an article, and I started noticing how certain, like Getty Images, for example, they own all these pictures of Black people and images of Black people. It could be my own father. They own the image. Now I have to get their permission. So that's why our own pictures, our own papers, and our own documentation becomes so important.
Yes. And when you said that, I got so fired up because of how in the prologue, how I open with my grandma, and how I'm writing that I'm angry because she's in the Library of Congress. And it really upset me how she's just labeled as evicted sharecropper. And I'm like, no, that's my grandma. She had 12 living children, her whole life. You don't reduce it to that label. And then I have to cite the Library of Congress for my grandma's own photo.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's, that's the power of institutions. And that's why we can also, continue to take our power back by creating our own institutions, creating our own archives, and writing our own histories.
Yeah. Seems like increasingly important. One of the things you focus on a lot in the book is this idea of solitary confinement and how it's used as a tool of terror. And earlier in this conversation, you mentioned adjustment centers. So explain what that is. Talk about adjustment centers and the SHU.
Yes. So, adjustment centers have long featured in the writing of imprisoned intellectuals, right? They feature in George Jackson's writing, in current writings coming out of California prisons. And so adjustment centers were these isolation cells that I show in my book came into existence in 1953 when Richard McGee was the director of corrections at the time. And he was really saying he was unsatisfied with how troublesome inmates, as he called them, problematic inmates, were being dealt with. So he put together this committee, and it was really a bunch of corrections officials and scientists like psychiatrists that designed adjustment centers to, in this Orwellian way, readjust literally people using solitary cells, using treatment regimes. And it was only 5 years later, so in 1958, that's when I found that document that was titled Special Procedures for Muslim Inmates, targeting the Nation of Islam and having them to be segregated and relocated as much as possible into adjustment units and identifying them as being problematic, and then expanding that in 1961 to all Black militants that were self-described. And so adjustment centers, they form the basis for mass solitary confinement in California, but also nationally, because California was getting letters from other prison officials asking, how do you handle those inmates? And those inmates, in quotes, they were talking about Black people that were, reading about the civil rights movement at the time, or if you had the wrong article in your cell, right? The same thing happens now. You have the wrong book or article in your cell, you are going to the SHU, which is the segregated housing unit. And so these adjustment centers, they become the foundation for the national spread of solitary in this fashion, and the targeting of Black protest as being intimately linked to solitary. And in 1989 in California, when Pelican Bay opens as the state's first supermax, where you are in your cell 23 hours a day, adjustment centers are the model for Pelican Bay, and many people that were held in adjustment centers are promptly shipped to Pelican Bay when it opens.
I remember I had the honor of interviewing Geronimo Gijaga Pratt when he came out. After 27 years in prison, most of it in solitary confinement. And I was shocked at how joyful and kind and happy and strong he was. And he told me, well, he had to work out 7 days a week and meditate and do Tai Chi and all this stuff. And I know that Chris Holden had a bill recently to eliminate, or at least not eliminate, but sharply limit the amount of time folks could be in. That failed. We've repeatedly failed. And yet it's solitary. This type of incarceration is pretty widely acknowledged to be inhumane, isn't it, in the rest of the world?
It is. The UN explicitly describes solitary as a form of torture. The UN also links solitary to prisoners of war. And what's interesting about that is that, prisoners of war also routinely in history experienced setups such as gladiator fights. And as I show in my book, correctional officers in California, as we know in the public too, because there's been some really great journalistic exposés, have long participated in gladiator fights. And so I create this link and take a note from imprisoned intellectuals talking about how, as prisoners of a literal war, which is what I agree, that's what this is. It's a designed war, gladiator fighting, solitary, they go hand in hand historically. And so none of these tools are truly new. It really shows there's nothing new under the sun when your intention is domination.
Why are Black people targeted so much more with all of these inhumane and torturous measures?
So it stems, the short answer is that it extends from our colonial legacy, because when you have a colonial country like the United States, colonialism, the only way it's possible is if you label populations as being inhuman, undesirable, and in need of containment. And so we see that with indigenous populations being labeled as undesirable and then forcibly removed violently into boarding schools and reservations. And then with, the descendants of enslaved Africans, they were also indigenous to their homeland. So there's this strong connection too to indigeneity, colonialism, the containment of people, and the labeling of people as a problem. And once you do that, you are then allowed to criminalize people. And those labels, they are so violent because then they allow for the physical removal, the physical torture under the guise of being legal, or under the guise of being morally right, because, well, it is morally right because that population is undesirable. And then if we also use extra legal violence, well, since they're considered by the state to not be technically fully human, then there's no harm in using extra legal violence as well. And so that is really the root of the strong anti-Black racism that we have in our country, and the anti-Indigenous racism. It's coming from this colonial history.
Dr. Brittany Friedman is my guest. I'm going to ask you when we come forward the question I probably should have started with, the big question. Your book is called Carceral Apartheid. I'm going to ask you to define that, explain it. What exactly have we been talking about for the past hour? That's straight ahead on KBLA Talk 1580.
More of First Things First with Dominique DiPrima when we come forward.
There's new reaction following the Trump administration's sweeping efforts to cut the federal workforce.
Fired but not forgotten. The Testimony Project. Bearing witness, breaking silence, building community. KBLA Talk 1580 is committed to amplifying the voices of Black federal workers impacted by the mass firings. Rooted in the Black tradition of testimony, this initiative ensures that those who served us are not erased from history. Through firsthand accounts, investigative storytelling, and community-driven dialogue, we intend to expose injustice, preserve truth, and demand accountability. If you or someone you know has been forced out of federal employment due to the mass firings, please contact us at info@smileyAudiomedia.com or via the open mic feature on the KBLA 1580 app. We want to hear from you and share your story. KBLA Talk 1580, we've got your Black.
I feel so alone.
I'm embarrassed to talk about it.
How can I help my kid if I can't help myself?
I can't remember when I wasn't stressed.
I don't like inside.
When you feel overwhelmed by your thoughts and emotions, it's okay to get help. You are not alone. CalHope is here for you with free, safe, and confidential mental health resources for youth, young adults, families, and you. Find support now at calhope.org.
KBLA Talk 1580. We've got a lot to talk about.
Imagine a Los Angeles where everyone can thrive, where communities have access to the resources they need to succeed. That's the vision of Detours Mentoring Group, Inc. They're dedicated to improving life in LA County by providing educational support, employment assistance, and spaces for community engagement. By 2050, they want LA to be the best place to connect, create, learn, live, and play. They're working toward an education system that's well-resourced and culturally responsive, becoming a hub for artists and innovators, and making sure everyone has access to healthy food, quality healthcare, and safe housing. It's about building a future where we all have the chance to succeed. We invite you to learn more about their mission and get involved with Detours Mentoring Group, Inc. This is a community call to action from KBLA Talk 1580.
The conversation continues right now with Dominique DiPrima on First Things First.
Dr. Brittany Friedman is my guest. Carceral Apartheid, How Lies and White Supremacists Run Our Prisons. It's an eye-opener even for somebody like me who talks about this stuff all the time. Let's start with the definition. What is carceral apartheid?
Carceral apartheid, it is a governing strategy, first and foremost, that is designed to ensure division, decimation, and deception of communities that are deemed problematic. And this is achieved through three levels that I identify. First are official means, which are laws. It could be, laws such as incarceration, arrest, sentencing, but also importantly, extra legal controls, which I document as having alliances with white supremacists between law enforcement and civilians, among many others. And then finally, it's clandestine often. Often it can be very difficult to prove that this system even exists and that it's coordinated. And then if you try to point it out, you could be accused of, being a conspiracy theorist. But, there's been many a Black movement leader that has been proven right in history.
Right, after first being called a conspiracy theorist. Yeah, it's interesting. We were talking earlier in the show today about how Chad Bianco, who's the sheriff of Riverside, has thrown his big cowboy hat in the ring to be governor of California. And he was formerly an oath keeper. For you, after the research that you've done, I doubt that's surprising.
It is not surprising at all, because groups like the Oath Keepers, Proud Boys, they see law enforcement as merely just an extension, as a step up into really solidifying their power and being able to use that position to wield white supremacy. And also because they see law enforcement as allies. That's why they fist bump each other, at rallies and marches, because they are one and the same. There's, even with the January 6th riot, I am blanking on the last number I saw, but in the most recent investigation, there's a sizable amount of people that were either current or former law enforcement or military.
Yeah, no, we were talking about that too. But the thing is, at the same time, they attacked cops, beat them with things, and, several died in the subsequent days. So that seems like a contradiction.
So what's interesting, though, is that the Aryan Brotherhood, we could argue that they have done something similar in history in California prisons. So the Aryan Brotherhood, long ally of corrupt correctional officers. But then there's times where, they get out of line in terms of what law enforcement would say. I interviewed someone who was very influential on the corrections side in terms of the security threat group identification. And he chuckled in my face when he found out that I was writing my book. And he said that it was unnecessary because they already knew everything they needed to know about Black protests in prisons. And then I said, well, then why didn't you systematically target the Aryan Brotherhood until much later? And he's like, oh, they got too big for their britches. And he's talking about an incident, in, I think it's 1981, in the federal system where they killed a correctional officer. And so we see these historical parallels, whether in prison or not, where white supremacist groups are allies, then they kind of rise up, and then the state squashes them, but not completely.
It's a little the Frankenstein creature gets out of control. It has to be put in check. That's chilling.
Yes.
I was thinking about this as I was reading, and this memo comes out from the Department of Education. We're gonna defund your schools. If you have anything cultural, if you have anything we consider DEI, that includes themed dorms. So does that mean that segregation inside of our correctional facilities will now be considered DEI and have to be dismantled?
If they apply their logic evenly. I mean, I don't even think it makes sense to them.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's like they're running on the seat of their pants and just making things up as they go, because they're like, well, we're in a position of power, so we could just make things up as we go and just say things that are completely absurd.
How do you see what we're hearing with the signals that we're getting from the current I call them the new Confederate Republican Party, about the reprivatization of prisons, the mass incarceration of undocumented individuals? How do you see that impacting what you're outlining here of carceral apartheid?
So what I see is, I just finished writing a piece with a grad student, Raquel Delerme, so I'll shout her out. But she and I just finished it. It'll be published very soon. And we are basically making a prescription that, based on our roles as, studying social control and racism, that we are going to expect in 2025 to see an increase in government spying against communities of color. We are going to see an expansion and a more even just explicit definition between the government and private profit of the correctional and detention systems. And we're going to see a spike in removals of people from various communities, and an outright redeclaration of war that we saw with, the war on drugs, war on crime, we're going to that's going to rev up in 2025 is our prediction.
Do you see it as a hyper profit generating center, or just a way of keeping people in check, or what do you see as the push behind that?
I think the underlying push is profit. And then also, I think it's just a vampant dehumanization of people. I think that it's actually quite evil. It's why, even when I'm writing in my work, I constantly have to reset, and I cleanse myself, because I'm like, this stuff is horrible. That people actually could, engage in these, not just thought patterns, but use their power in this way. I think what's so telling is that I believe it's the CEO, I think, of Core Civic in Tennessee. He went on the record for the Tennessean a couple of days ago saying that he's so excited about Trump's executive orders because that's going to extend the contract for Core Civic, and they're going to basically make millions more dollars because the number of beds that are going to be required of them is going to exponentially spike. And he was celebrating.
Just got a minute here, Dr. Friedman. What should Black activists, Black radical militants, our communities, what should they do or know coming into this season?
I think, one, continue to save, as we were saying earlier, save everything that you can about this moment in history. Two, don't broadcast your organizing on social media. If you're meeting or if you're planning, don't broadcast your strategies or your plans in that way. Three, I would say, is, continue to tried and true tactics. If you're going to a protest, cover your face, wear a mask. All of these, different means of trying to subvert the surveillance and the increase in surveillance that we're going to see. And then finally, using your voice, as we're doing now, as you do so brilliantly, on your show every day, right? Doing that.
And just in 30 seconds here, what do you want to leave us with?
I do want to leave us with hope. I want people to know that we are all here in this time and place for a reason. We all have gifts, and our gifts are needed. And please use your gift for this moment. Don't be silent.
Thank you for using your gift with this book, Carceral Apartheid, How Lies and White Supremacists Run Our Prisons. Tavis Smiley's up next. You know that. He's Thursday Jam, so he'll have a great show for you today. I'm going to Angela Davis for my quote of the day. She says, jails and prisons are designed to break human beings, to convert the population into specimens in a zoo, obedient to our keepers, but dangerous to each other. Don't forget to tap in on social media. The show continues online, KBLA 1580 on all platforms. I'm at DiPrima Radio, DiPrima Radio. The battle rages on my Instagram about Kendrick Lamar. If you want to follow, like, or subscribe, it's much appreciated. If you want to comment, I love that too. Tomorrow's Friedman Friday. We'll be unpacking exactly what the California Legislative Black Caucus did today. All of that is coming up. Like my mama used to say, history is now, and we're making it together. Until tomorrow, one love.
KBLA 1580 Santa Monica.
I'm Bree Wood with 4 Things You Should Know with BIN News. 86-year-old Missouri man Andrew Lester, who pleaded guilty to shooting black teenager Ralph Break in West Texas, has reached at least 58 cases. Health leaders